In this Gimp video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a wallpaper in a very powerful way that will allow you to control the color of it and change the color of it at any point in the editing. The first thing we want to do is figure out the size of your desktop because you want to make the size of this image exactly equal to the size of your desktop. That way, whenever you add this wallpaper to your background on your computer, it will fit your computer correctly. Now there are a couple of ways to do this. You can go into the properties and your display options on your computer and check the size. If you happen to know it offhand, you can just type it in manually when you click File New, or you can do it just by clicking the print screen key on your keyboard and then clicking File, Create from Clipboard. And what that'll do is that'll take the screenshot that you made whenever you hit the print screen key on your keyboard, and it'll create a new file from that screenshot. Now, obviously, I don't want my image to look like this, which is what you see here. I want it to just be a black canvas. So I'm just going to simply hit Select All and hit the Delete key. Now I have a blank canvas ready to be worked on, equal to the size of my desktop. So first off, I'm going to fill my background with blue. And I'm going to create a couple of highlights on this to kind of emulate the look of a gradient. Now, some people would just click on the blend tool and create the gradients right here on the spot. I don't like to do that because it doesn't give me as much power afterward to make the changes. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So if I right click and I click a new layer, and I'm going to set it to transparency and hit OK. Reset my colors back to black and white by hitting this. And grab your gradient tool, switch them over so it goes white to black. And I'm going to set my layer mode, this is key here, I'm going to set my layer mode to overlay. And I'm going to create a gradient like so. And you'll see whenever you create a gradient, make sure it's set to radial, because I mean, you don't have to set it whatever you want, but I want to use a radial here. And you'll see it creates a lighter in the middle and darker in the outer part. If I click on normal, you'll see there's the gradient. It goes from light to dark. Now my overlay, it goes from light to dark. Now if I hide this, you'll see that's the normal blue, and then there it is with the gradient. Now I'm going to right click and click new layer, set it to transparency, set my gradient shape to bilinear, and create another gradient. Set my layer mode to overlay, and then adjust the opacity down to something that's not quite so powerful. Now the reason why I do it this way instead of the typical create a few gradients on a single layer is because whenever I grab my bucket tool, if I wanted to change the color of my background, I can do that really easily, and it creates and keeps those highlights. I could even go into colors, hue saturation, and just adjust the hue right here, and it'll give me a lot more control on what color my background is. And it gives me a really easy way to just, if I don't know what color I want it to be, I can just do it like this. And you can do this with the way I teach. You can do this at any step in the process. So if you're halfway through working on your project and you have a couple of different shapes already put in here and everything like that, you can still go back to that background layer and change the color of that, and it will change it perfectly. So first thing what we're going to do is we're going to create a couple of highlight shapes and highlight rings. So make sure that your colors are set to black and white. Right click and click new layer. Set the layer mode to your background color, which should be white, and then hit OK. Now set your layer mode to overlay, and you'll see it makes everything lighter. Now click on your paths tool and start making a shape. So click out here in space somewhere and click down here, drag, hold in shift and release, and it'll break that corner. And then you can finish doing it like that. I don't really like that shape, so let's try a different shape. There's a different way to do it than what I just did too. This is a little easier for most people. I've come to find that some computers, for whatever reason, don't seem to do this right. But if you click, and then you click here and create your curve, and then release, and then click back here, you can just go to edit, click on this node, and just grab that and pull it back. You can move your node around, adjust the size to something you like, and that's not bad. I'll go with that. Now click on your Paths tab, right click, and click Path to Selection. Whoops, see a problem here? My selection cut a little bit of my back corner there, and that's because my path isn't far enough out. In order to fix that, I'm just going to undo, edit undo, a single step, go back to editing my path, and just click and drag that further out. Or you could have also just added to the path, but we're not going to do that. And now you don't have to go over to your path, right click, and click Path to Selection. You can also just simply click Selection of Path if your if your Paths tool is open, and it'll just create your selection all the same. So now right click and click Add Layer Mask and set it to Selection. Hit Add. Now click Select None to deselect that path, and exit out of your Paths tool by clicking on a new tool. That way you don't see that path. So there's our first shape. Let's adjust the opacity down to something a little more subtle, and we'll create a new shape. So right click, create a new layer, background color white, set the layer mode to overlay, click on our Paths tool, and create another new shape. Right click, add layer mask. Oh, just kidding. First you got to make your selection from the path. So this time let's actually bring it around like this. That way it will create that selection better. Because what it does is it starts at the end point of our path and it creates a straight line to the start point of your path. That's what our selection does. So if you give it a very small area to do that with, it's a lot less likely to mess up. So now click Selection of Path, and you'll see it selected it right this time. So now right click on my layer and click Add Layer Mask, set it to Selection, and then click Select None, and exit off your Paths tool by clicking on a different tool. Now adjust your opacity down to something that works. Okay. Now we'll repeat that process again. New layer, background color, okay. Layer mode, overlay. Click on our Paths tool. Actually, let's make it a little lower. And create our shape. Click on Selection from Path. Right click, click Add Layer Mask. Set it to Selection. Hit Add. Exit off of your Paths tool. Now click Select None, or Control-Shift-A is the shortcut key for that. And adjust your opacity down. And there you go. Now you've got 3 highlight shapes made. Now we're going to go ahead and create a few rings. This is pretty easy to do with the Ellipse Select tool. So you click on your Ellipse Select tool, you reset this, okay. And then you set it to Fixed, Aspect Ratio, and you type in 1:1. And what that'll do is that'll let you create a perfectly shaped circle no matter what you do. You can also just hold in the Shift key to hold this aspect ratio, but I like to do it this way because every once in a while that doesn't quite work right for me. It's personal preference, whatever works for you. So create a nice big booming ring, and then click on your Paths tab and click Selection to Path. I like to do that because I want to have that path, exact path, ready to go if I ever need to make that selection again later. So click Select, Border, And let me explain why I need to do that first. Currently, our selection is this all of this right here, all the way up to this curve. And you can see the what they call the marching ants walking around the edge of my canvas here and along this edge of my circle. That's because that's all of the selected area. So we need to change that selected area from all of this to just a very thin sliver along my edge. And to do that, we're going to click Select, Border, and then click OK. Set it to 1 pixel or something really thin like that, and hit OK. And then right click, create a new layer, set the layer to the background color, set the layer mode to overlay, right click, add a layer mask, set it to selection, and hit add. And now click select none, and that'll deselect everything. And there you go, a nice thin ring ready to go. The only problem with this is if you look here, you can see that that border selection method also selected the edge of my canvas all around here. And we don't want that. All we want is that ring. So to fix this, all we have to do is change our layer mode a little bit. Now if you don't understand how layer modes work, essentially all it is it's a black and white relationship that runs parallel to your layer. So it's another image that runs parallel to whatever layer you're working on. Where in the layer mask, black is transparent, or I'm sorry, it's opaque. You can't see through it. And white is transparent. You can see through it. Correction. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. It's the other way around. White is opaque. You can't see through it, and black is transparent. So, in other words, if you color black on a layer mask, it's going to essentially erase or make whatever is on that layer invisible so you can see underneath of it. If you color white, it's going to make that area visible again. So I know that's a little hard to explain and a little bit confusing. If it doesn't make sense to you, I have linked a couple other video tutorials I've done where I explain this in a little bit more detail and I actually show how it works. So if you still don't get that, check out the videos I've linked in this tutorial. So now what we're going to do is we're going to click on our lasso tool and we're going to create a selection by selecting all the way around on this border because we want to get rid of everything except for our loop. So hit enter to finish it. So now we have everything selected except for our actual arc. So what we're going to do is we're going to click our bucket tool, make sure it's set to fill whole selection, and fill that entire selection with black, which again, like I said earlier, will make it invisible. So as you can see now, that is no longer visible and it's no longer there. So let's zoom out, and there's one ring. So let's repeat that process. New layer, background color, okay. Layer mode, overlay. Click on our ellipse tool. Your settings should be set to this correct now. You shouldn't have to change those again, but I would check and make sure. And then just create another loop. Something that you like. And repeat that process. Path to selection, or selection to path. Select border, 1 pixel, okay. Right click, add layer mask, selection, add. And then select none to deselect all. And again, you'll see we have that same problem where the edge is bad. So we'll click on our lasso select, or I'm sorry, the free select tool. Lasso select is the Photoshop term for it. I used to use Photoshop before I transferred over to Gimp, so every once in a while I may say a tool weird like that and not realize it. Please forgive me for that. I try really hard to not do that, but yeah, so we'll go ahead and finish creating our lasso select here, or our free select. Click there, Now grab your bucket tool and fill that with black. Make sure you're on the layer mask and fill that selection with black. Deselect all with Control-Shift-A or select none, and you'll see that now our selection has been fixed, or our ring for that matter. The cool thing about this overlay is, look, it creates a couple of pixels whenever they overlap that are lighter. See, like, look at this area, it's selected by all three of them, so it's really, really light. That's what really makes this unique. So now we have a couple of rings and a couple of highlights. Let's create a few lowlights. So let's create a new layer, and this time we're going to set it to our foreground color, which should be black, and hit OK. And set that layer mode to overlay. Essentially what we're doing here is we're duplicating what we did before. We're doing exactly what we did here with creating all of these shapes that we had just made. The only difference is, instead of our layer being filled with white, it's going to be filled with black. And the reason why is because whenever you fill a layer with black and set it to overlay, it darkens the color instead of lightens it, just like you see here. So we're going to create a new path by clicking on our Paths tool and create a shape. Now click Selection from Path, right click, Add Layer Mask, from Selection, hit Add, and deselect all with Control-Shift-A or click Select None, and then hop off of there, exit off of your Paths tool by clicking on a new tool, and adjust your opacity down to something you like. And there's the first low light. So let's create a couple more. New layer, foreground color, layer mode, set it to overlay. Click on your Paths tool, and then create a new shape. And click Selection from Path, right click, and click Add Layer Mask, from Selection, and click Add. Now click Select None or Control-Shift-A, exit off of your Paths tool by clicking on a new tool, and adjust your opacity down to something you like. And that doesn't look too bad. I'm not too happy with how this one looks, but that's okay. For demonstration purposes, the goal really is to explain to you how to do this. Now let's go ahead and create one more ring, a dark ring, by clicking on our circle tool, our ellipse tool, and making a ring. Like so. Now save it as a path by clicking Selection to Path. Right click, add a new layer, foreground color, and click OK. Make sure, yeah, layer mode type, foreground. Set the layer mode to overlay. Click Select. Border, 1 pixel, click OK. Right click and add a layer mask. Oops, what did I do? I must have missed. Add a layer mask from your selection. Now select None and fix the edge again. And that can be done just by selecting around the canvas. And press Enter. Grab your bucket tool, fill that in with black to make it invisible, and select None. And there you go. That's pretty much how it's done. Now, like I said earlier, if you change this background color to anything, it's going to reflect directly on the rest of the image. If I wanted to make it green, I can make it green. Actually, I think it really looks nice green. You can click colors, hue saturation, and you can see you can completely change how this image looks just by adjusting the color. And you could also, if you desired, you could add a gradient to your background. Maybe like a blue to a cyan or something like that to make it look pretty neat. Cyan. Create a gradient. Or if you don't like that, I personally like the single color better. You can also go with, well, that won't work. It won't work with black or white, but it'll work with every other color. So let's go back to our blue that we had used before. Okay. So there you go. I hope that makes sense. If you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to shoot me a comment in the comment section below. Thanks.